Right. Ben, what do you say? I think more importantly, and again, having also just, watched and listened to Bright's presentation a while ago, what's the way forward?
Yes, thanks. I think Bright has gone into the process where, the minister is now inviting us because from civil society perspective, our initial, work was really to focus on the propriety of the transaction, to see how we optimizes the interest of Ghana. It is not because we didn't know that the process was faulty. We deliberately left that out. And, Martin Amidu did a detailed work, from, the system perspective. And you also had the Attorney General also raising significant concerns about why Ghana would want to do such a transaction. But as I indicated, we wanted to focus on exposing the problems with the transaction, and one of which was the valuation question. And even when you look at the valuation, you can only trend available data on the producing asset. You are assigning 48 leases to Agyapa, and we have only 12 projects on those lists. There can be many, many projects on those leases in the future. So if you use revenues or royalties from the 12 projects to do your estimation and your valuation, of which even in that space, you are still undervaluing the asset, what do you do with the future projects that will come on that concession, for which the investor will still benefit because we have codified the geographic location of these 48 leases into an agreement and assigned the interest to Agyapa in this transaction. So what that simply means is that any investor who puts in money because of projections on the 12 project stands to benefit even if we get hundreds of projects on the 48 leases into the future. And our position is that it's not a simple cash book financial analysis that you can do to be able to estimate what potentially we can get. And the numbers are there. If you track, even on the 12 producing asset, you realize that the companies every year discover more gold and the timelines of the project extend. And that is why, the sponsors of the transaction, which again exposes the process, were smart to say that as long as gold can be extracted from those leases, Agyapa has an interest in it. So it is deceptive for anybody to say that, we have 5 or 15 years time frame. And that is not in the agreement. The agreement states that as long as gold can be commercially extracted from these leases, by giving us $500 million, these investors have up to 49% stake on these leases. And that is really worrisome. All right. And if you track back to the process where they're inviting us to see that the people who engineered the whole process from the establishment of the MIF Act to the agreements that subsequently ensued, it is the same people who knew what they wanted from this transaction. All right. And we cannot pretend we do not know at this point. And I think civil society have to do a good job of now also getting into that process to expose why some of these problems are emerging, for which, nobody wants to listen and engage on the intellectual basis why Ghana cannot take a less risky asset and inject it into the kind of risk and assumptions that we are being exposed to. And the finance minister makes the point that, if we list on the stock exchange, we could all of a sudden turn this asset into several billion. And I heard him mention $38 billion. What is the numbers? What are the numbers to justify or to show that we can track that growth in the next 10, 15, or 20 years? The biggest streaming company with most diversified asset is Franco-Nevada. And their assets is about $26 billion for all the metals that they trade in. And for the many years that they have been in the space, diversifying into many portfolios. Finance Minister wants to convince us that in the space of time, we can be able to outperform all other streaming companies that are all hovering around $1.5 billion, to move ahead of Franco-Nevada, that has to be justified. And that intellectual discussion is really crucial at this point. Why we wanted this agreement so badly to go back to Parliament is because of the posturing of the finance minister. And you heard the video that you played from last week, that you either listen to him or not, because he's willing to do it. But so our hope was that if we had this agreement back to Parliament, then we have opportunity to then engage in that intellectual exercise and also examine the process that gave birth to this Agyapa transaction. And also, the new appetite to now, securitize all our natural resources, for a short-term gain. And this is not just happening to our royalty, and we have to pay attention to that. Just last year, we had finance minister supporting GMPs to buy 7% stake in our oil fields. And that asset is now hiding in Cayman Islands. All effort by civil society to get that asset into Ghana has failed. So you have $300 million cash flow that in this critical period of our country can support the budget and provide buffer, for the kind of books that he's looking for to be able to raise debt. But it's hidden in Cayman Islands, and it's not part of our budget. All right, there are also speculations about attempt to use the Heritage Fund to also create another security for investment. So civil society will have to double up and now examine the process much more thoroughly to see what is engineering that faulty assumptions around how we can optimize our resources. Let's come back to even some of the assumptions that is creating MIF and many other state enterprises to be able to do business in the space. On this same royalty that is supposed to go into investment, social capital investment, to improve lives of our people, to reduce carnage on our roads. Because we passed MIF without consultation, last year, Ghana government gave 1.3 billion Ghana cedis to MIF. In spite of the budget, the big hole in this budget, for MIF to now think about what investments they want to do with it. And they're now saying that they want to invest about $500 million in small-scale mining and track the mining industry. It is only the large-scale mining companies that are contributing significantly to revenue in the mining sector. Even though small-scale mining gives us about 40% in production. So you are now taking the revenue you are getting from the big-scale companies and go and risk it in the small-scale sector. And the operational cost of MIF alone is about 30 million Ghana cedis. If you trend that in the next 5-10 years, the money that you could invest directly into infrastructure development and building the country, you are now getting into that speculative assumption that if you set up vehicles to be able to reinvest the revenue, that is what will generate the returns. We need to interrogate that to see whether, fixing the road as a government is better than assuming that you can make investment and generate returns. All right, so it creates a new avenue for us all, civil society, media, and independence to be able to analyze where we are going as a country with our natural resources and apply the brakes at this point. Because if you track just the institutions that have been established in the past 3 to 4 years, we are pumping about 100 million Ghana cedis a year just to maintain these institutions. You talk about MIF, you talk about GISDEC, you talk about GUIDEC, you talk about Petroleum Hub. They are all siphoning resources that can actually go into social capital and alleviate the plight of our people in these hard times. And we have to take a critical look at these kind of flowery assumptions that are not generating value for the Ghanaian people.